From the web app perspective, we did that the right way because everything that we're doing is so customized. We needed something that we could dictate how it needed to work as opposed to trying to think like a one size fits all traditional biz. That was definitely the right route for us because it is custom built and we have nuanced edge case journeys that we need to account for, which that technology allows us to do.
You're listening to Inside Commerce, a weekly e-com strategy, technology and CX focused podcast hosted by experienced digital consultants and re-platform specialists James Gedd and Paul Rogers. Get insights into e-com strategy and leading brands, hear from industry thought leaders and leading tech vendors with practical advice to help you improve your online CX. This episode is sponsored by Shopify, and we've got another exciting guest today. So we have Lauren Duncan, who's the head of e-commerce at Philip Kingsley. I'll let her do a proper introduction in a bit. But I had the pleasure of being on a panel with Lauren and a few other senior female leaders in e-commerce earlier this year. We were discussing CRM and loyalty, and quite a few of the points that Lauren was making, I thought would make a very interesting extended podcast to get a bit more into the brand story and their digital evolution. And I managed to persuade her to come on the podcast. So fantastic. So a warm welcome, Lauren. How are you doing?
Thank you. Yeah, happy to be here. Doing good. Sun is shining. Can't complain.
Excellent. And this isn't your first podcast, is it? I believe you've previously been on Chloe's e-commerce master plan, was it?
Yeah, that's right. And I've been on the We Inspire one as well, that the WeCom team operate too. Amazing.
Two very good podcasts. So before we get into the questions around, I guess, Philip Kingsley's digital journey and evolution, let's start with an introduction. For those who've not met you before, do you want to give an introduction to who you are, what you do, and your e-commerce journey?
Sure. So I am currently the head of e-commerce at Philip Kingsley. I've been with the brand for 4.5 years now. But prior to that, I've been working in e-commerce now for over 13 years, and very much focused most of my time there in beauty e-commerce. So like makeup, skincare, and now hair care. But I've also had time within the health insurance space, which is a bit rogue, and within fashion as well. So just very much focusing on those sort of e-com D2C focuses for me. I didn't intend to end up in digital marketing. I knew I wanted to do marketing when I first sort of fell into it. And then my first role was an online e-com role. And then I very quickly realized that that is something that I really enjoyed, mostly at the time, because all of the data that you could get from anything that you were doing was so instantaneous. And I liked that instant gratification of this is working, this isn't working, and be able to make those decisions. Whereas with a traditional marketing role, at least back then, like 13, 14 years ago, you couldn't see anything as opposed to validate what you're doing is right or wrong. So that kept me going. And that data sort of decision making has definitely been something that's followed me throughout. And I know that everyone's sort of on board with that mindset now. But yeah, I think the access to data is the thing that keeps me very interested.
Mm. Yeah, and actually, do you know what I think the democratization of data in e-commerce is quite an interesting thing, because you don't have to have a full analytics and data science team to get access to data if you have the right the right technologies, and the tooling is accelerated massively. So it's actually I find now that the bigger challenge is how do you focus on the right data, because potentially you have so much you can drown in it.
100%. I think that is definitely the case with most businesses I've worked in. We've got had really strong first party data, and that's definitely the case at Philip Kingsley, where we have this data on people's hair textures and types and how often they wash their hair, all of that sort of stuff. But sometimes it's what do we do that's meaningful with this data? Like, great that we have it, but what are we going to do about it?
Excellent. Well, let's get into the brand story evolution, that digital journey, because I think this is a cracking one. So let's start with that brand story and the heart of the business, the London clinic. So like, where's the brand come from? What is it?
Absolutely. So we were founded by Philip Kingsley over 60 years ago when he started with the clinic business, which is the same Mayfair clinic that we've got today. Has been running for over 60 plus years now. And he was one of the first sort of trichologists within the UK that are essentially hair and scalp scientists. So where a dermatologist focuses on your skin, a trichologist is like a step beyond that, where they really focus on your hair and your scalp health. So he opened the clinic to really focus on hair loss, scalp conditions, and people with just really hair concerns, whether it's just like dry, damaged, ravaged, and started developing all of the products himself based on what people were coming in with. So where I think Philip Kingsley's got really interesting sort of unique storytelling is that most of the projects that people know us for have come out of a really interesting story, whether it's one of Philip's, actor friends that have come into the clinic and he's developed a product specifically for whatever they were seeing. And then the retail range that we now sell that are our shampoos and conditioners over the counter, they've all been developed based on the products that were working in the clinic and for the products that were developed for these concerns that we kept seeing day in, day out. And what's also interesting about the brand is that we're still run by the Kingsley family. So we're independent family run business, which is now owned by Philip's wife and his two daughters, which I think in today's age is very rare to get that sort of small, independent family run beauty brand. Everyone under the sun seems to be selling these days. So, it definitely keeps that sort of small business mindset, no matter how much we've grown over the last, definitely over the last 5 years where I've been here.
Yeah, and we're going to come on to a bit later about the hair loss element and the emotional side of it and the difference between men and women, because I think that's going to be a really interesting discussion strand. As somebody who's in a family of men whose hairline goes backwards from their 40s onwards, it feels like there's definitely a sensitivity shift in that people are more open about it, talk about it more, and it's less like, oh, don't mention it.
Yeah.
So yeah, let's part that, because I know we've got a discussion on that later, but let's start with some of the things that have had a significant impact, I guess, in the digital transformation of the business. So like many retailers, lockdown had a pronounced impact on you. Obviously you're a clinic-based business, lockdown comes, hey, we can't meet in person. How did, as a business, how did you react actually, and how quickly? And then what was the impact of shifting from a physical in-person into more virtual engagement?
When COVID first happened, so I joined towards like the second lockdown. So when I joined the business 4.5 years ago, they were already working on this solution. So obviously COVID hit, we couldn't see everyone in the clinic. And very quickly, the team did manage to get up and running a virtual consultation service, because it had the business thinking, how are we going to continue to service clients that have already booked in and are existing clients with us, but also still treating anyone that's going through something new, because we also saw a big spike in hair loss driven by COVID as well. So that was like a new thing that not a lot of people had experience of. And our trichologists were obviously the most experts in the country to help deal with those sorts of challenges people were seeing as a result of COVID. So this was about late 2021 that the business got up and running virtual consultations in a very basic format, in terms of let's just host them on Teams, on Zoom, on, Google Meet, just to continue that servicing. And when we sort of saw the demand for that grow, where we were able to reach people who were further afield than central London being able to come into our clinic, that got the business thinking, okay, we actually need to take a step back and future-proof these clinical services where it has historically been just an in-person experience and an in-person service. How do we move that into digital servicing for the longer term to sort of future-proof against more of these sort of COVID incidents, if anything else so happened like that again? And at that time, we obviously didn't know how long it was going to go on for. But also, how do we reach more people within the UK? So the virtual consultations enabled us to do that. So we started investing more in that digital transformation for the clinic side of things, which led us down to, once we got that up and running, there was early 2022, we saw a lot of competitors coming in to the prescription clinical space in the UK, looking at male pattern hair loss specifically. and enabling customers to get prescription products online. And I think that was part of a bigger trend we were seeing in the market, where people were able to get prescription products without an in-person consultation. So that was a really interesting sort of shift in the market. And again, we were like, well, we know we've got these products already that we can give to people suffering with male pattern hair loss. We know we've got virtual consultations set up to sort of enable any more complex conversations to happen, to enable that prescription. And then we've always had our prescribers who are able to actually give the prescription to somebody who's saying, you know, these are my symptoms, this is my medical history, this is the treatment plan we're recommending. They can sign that all off, and, you know, Bob's your uncle, there you go, off you go, and you can start seeing results and serving that customer without having to have that in-person experience. So that led us down the route of, okay, we need to sort of jump on board this. And it sort of took two different routes. We first started looking at that male pattern hair loss journey and going, okay, we can really easily pull together an assessment. We've got a great development team that we work with on all of our sort of digital projects. And so we built that all out from scratch in terms of what that looked like, including the subscription mechanism that went with that. But also we then invested in building a web app that would support both the virtual consultation journeys and the prescription subscription element of the male pattern hair loss treatment plans.
What do Mattel, Victoria Beckham, Sennheiser, and Glossier all have in common? They power their businesses with Shopify. Shopify is the most innovative and scaled commerce platform on the planet. It also happens to have the best converting checkout on the planet. Shopify, powering the future of enterprise commerce. Find out more at shopify.com/enterprise.
I'd love to talk about the assessments, actually, because if we take, it's a version of an online quiz, essentially, and quizzes have become increasingly important. From, you talked about data capture before and like first party data around customers, but also about guiding and educating people through a journey that's more complex than just, I need to buy it now. But the way they're executed varies massively, and the challenge of capturing the right data. So I'd love to know, like, how did you go about getting the language, the style, because you've got to capture specific technical information, in that, in order for it to have a meaningful impact from like a product recommendation point of view?
Yeah, so the most essential thing when we were first developing the assessment was, what information do we really need from a client to be able to accurately diagnose and prescribe them with like a prescription product? So that was the key thing, is like, what are those really must-have things? And then from a business perspective, what is good for us to have to then be able to personalize their onward journey and to be able to identify, are they high risk, low risk? Do we need them to have a chat with one of our consultants, or can we get them straight through to a really simplified journey for them and for us? So it was really just looking at everything on those assessments has a purpose, whether it's to help personalize their journey after they've onboarded to a subscription plan, so that we know their hair type and texture, so we can follow up with the best shampoo and conditioner and other treatments or supporting products to help their journey. Or we can go, okay, they've got these specific symptoms or this medical history, which could impact what treatment plan we can then safely prescribe them. So all of those data points are combined into a very complex logic in the back end, which dictates what journey they go through, what treatment plans they're being offered, and then how we send that through to our prescriber team to be able to accurately look at something and go, yes, this treatment plan is suitable for this specific client. Or they come back and go, actually, they need to pivot and go on something like this because of these symptoms together.
Yeah, it's definitely more complex output calculations, isn't it, than a lot of the quizzes are. select file for our 4 or 5 lifestyle choices and, hey, look, here's our products that match. Whereas actually, if you get a wrong diagnosis, that could cause a major impact on somebody's skin. It could have a reaction.
Exactly. And I think that when you do sort of a traditional retail quiz, they're very simple and you can get like maybe one of 12 different answers, let's say, but everyone is funneled into those exact journeys. Whereas something with a prescription element, there are far more elements that have to kind of cross over and build up to get that right answer for that one individual customer. So the logic itself is a beast to get your head around.
Yeah, I'm not sure. And also, I guess the other thing you've got to factor in is you've got compliance and regulation for anything that's got a medical prescription to it, but you've got a constantly evolving set of research that is reacting to learning and then having to change formulations. So that must be an interesting challenge for you as the commercial lead, making sure that the journeys are aligned with the science behind it.
Absolutely. And I think that formulations piece is a really interesting one for us as a brand, whereas a lot of our competitors, they have one formula and they have stuck to it because it's like tried and tested and they just know that works. Whereas with our entire clinical range, we've got a very fluid product development process. So when we get that feedback from clients saying, this is working, we didn't like this, it's a constant feedback loop that then impacts our formulations. So we know that we're giving them always the best thing. It's not like a traditional NPD process where you launch something and you might not touch that formula for 2-3 years unless you legally have to. It's that constant feedback loop from our clients that sort of helps us ensure we're giving them the best product, the best time for them and their symptoms.
And this leads me on nicely into my next question, which is that, so you launched the male hair loss subscription platform. Subscription means different things to different brands. Obviously yours is not about just, hey, here's a cheaper product, get it regularly. What is the proposition? What's the value prop to the customer to keep them in a subscription? And then I guess linked to the last question is, how do you play back that benefit to them of staying in it, of like, hey, look, we keep improving this for you based on feedback? Because that comms part of keeping somebody in a subscription loop and perceiving the value is hugely important.
Yeah, 100%. I think the subscription element as a whole was a really interesting one for us to take on from a tech perspective as well as customer journey. But from the customer journey perspective, really the value proposition is you can treat your male pattern hair loss from the comfort of your home with discreet delivery. Because I think, like you said at the beginning, James, sometimes, or there was in the past, this stigma around men shouldn't worry about losing hair because it's just something that happens and it's not something that, you know, guys get around and chat about. They just sort of get on with it. But actually, there are options that you can go after, and you don't need to tell anyone that you're doing it. You can just get on with it and see the results and discreetly. So it's really about that convenience element for those male audiences and going, you can sort this. This is how. It's sometimes it's a one-step, once-a-day program, and the results are pretty, efficient. Within sort of 3 to 6 months, people have seen like life-changing hair on the back of that. But it's really about, this is what you get, and we do 50% off your first order because we're that confident that you're going to see results and you're going to want to stay on that treatment plan because you see the results. And then with the discount element, we maintain that throughout the life of their subscription by staying loyal to us. So that communication is quite light touch because I think, again, from a male perspective, we don't see as much appetite as we do with women in terms of give me more education, like give me more inspiration. They want to know the product works and they want to have it be convenient. They want to be able to manage it themselves. And I think it all revolves around that sort of factual, to the point information that they're looking for. Whereas our female audience, even from a virtual consultation and then getting them into a treatment plan, they much more want to understand, how does this product work? Tell me more about the ingredients. What else should I be doing alongside using this treatment plan? They're looking for much more involved emotional support throughout that whole journey than I think most men are, from the data that we've seen anyway.
Yeah, and I think this is a really interesting discussion actually about the customer insight piece and how you build a proposition that resonates to different audiences, because generalizations exist for a reason. There are always edge cases where people behave differently. But if I look at, obviously I'm more in tune with the male audience because I've got several friends who are completely bald now and have a shaved head. There's me who's mine's going backwards, and I have friends' kids who regularly call me slaphead. And I feel that, but I generally feel that that there's less sensitivity in male audiences now compared with previous generations, and actually it's more talked about, it's less stigmatized, but you would go off discreetly and buy something. You wouldn't sit around with a load of people and have a chat about, well, I'm considering buying this product for my hair. What do you think? You would, you don't worry about it publicly because it's common, but actually, you go and seek the solution directly yourself, which is a very male problem or solving orientated mindset.
Yeah, 100%. And I think we've definitely seen that in the campaigns that we have run. So we haven't done a huge amount of marketing around this whole proposition, but we did do a small 2.5 month one back in 2023. And during that, we were doing a lot of testing and learning, trying to figure out what resonates best with the male and the female audiences. And we definitely saw that, if you put in front of a man how statistically it's going to work, how efficiently it's going to work, what the time frame is, it's all very factual stuff. They just want to know the facts of what they're getting themselves into. And if it works, essentially, is just what is the efficacy of these products. And then from a female side, we definitely saw all of those storytelling, like clients sharing their experiences, how they felt about getting support, how they felt about talking to it, how they were talking to a lot of their other female friends about the issue and not knowing where to turn. They wanted that emotional support. They wanted reassurance throughout the journey. And they wanted to know that they were not alone in experiencing the symptoms and also in trying to find the right help and support to get them through that thing. Because I think one of Philip's sort of most famous quotes is that your hair can completely impact your psyche because everyone's got such an emotional attachment to their hair. And I think that's true for men and women. But I think the stigma for obviously men was just like, just get over it and crack on. Whereas that's definitely shifted over the last couple of years. But I don't think anyone, if a woman was going bald, nobody would ever turn around and just be like, well, that's just what happens. So just deal with it. But I think the general stigma and sort of helping people realize a lot of these things are normal, not just in hair loss, but the wider health sense, that's all fueled these conversations to happen more. And it's become less of a sort of taboo topic.
Yeah, exactly. And also some of the ridiculous preconceptions of the past, I think, especially with male audiences of full bodies of hair being linked with virility and things like this. It's like all of these nonsensical things that then create stigma, pressure, social embarrassment. I definitely think that younger generations are more in tune with honest conversations about it. But I guess a question I've got, which is, you started with male, then you went to female. What was the trigger for going into the female space? Because it feels like that's something that's, I guess, less talked about, and because it's more emotionally sensitive, it probably feels quite a harder proposition to take to people.
I think it has been the harder journey to get right because of that emotional support element and figuring out the best journey for our female clients. The original trigger for it was looking at our clinic in London. We have a much higher skew to female clients than we do male clients. And again, I think that is to do with all the reasons we've spoken about, whereas women are much more likely to source that sort of expert help. Whereas I think men just want the product and to scoot off. But we then started realizing there is nothing else that could help us reach that wider audience in the UK to help with those concerns where women have got female pattern hair loss or other types of hair loss. The more complex piece of female hair loss is with men experiencing male pattern hair loss. It's fairly easy to diagnose and it's fairly easy to treat if we can diagnose it, which in most cases of male hair loss, it is male pattern hair loss. Whereas female hair loss, there's sort of 101 reasons that could be causing it, and there's 101 ways that you could then treat it. So it became much more complex in terms of that diagnostic journey, and how do we take that and turn it into something digital whilst giving the female audiences the option to speak to someone if they want, because sometimes you can offer them everything they need straight away, but they're still going to want that human to human reassurance and sort of to chat through some of their concerns. So we did start with that virtual consultation journey where we used the same web app for the male pattern hair loss subscriptions. So we built everything and contained everything from scratch, where we host the consultations and then they can go from there into a treatment plan to manage on their app. That's now evolved further to sort of mimic what we've done with the male pattern hair loss subscriptions, where depending on somebody's symptoms, they could go straight to a subscription option if they want to, or they can choose to book a virtual or an in-clinic consultation. So it's much more open to see what works best for you, depending on what's happening. And then of course you've got cases where you might fill out the assessment and we go, actually, based on your symptoms, we do need to see you in person, or we do need to have a consultation just to talk through more of those complexities, because it isn't as straightforward.
And I take it then, because I think a lot of people are used to that online assessment quiz thing ending up of, here's 3 products that you need. I'm assuming then that the assessment piece is to gather data, and then there's expertise that sits behind it to evaluate it to determine what the next best action is.
Exactly. So we get that data through from the assessment, and then depending on if it is something we can diagnose for female pattern hair loss, we can take that into, these are the best sort of treatment drops that we can prescribe you. And then on the back of that, we can then personalize the rest of your hair care routine to support that healthy hair and scalp journey to sort of optimize your results. And we know that the female audience that we've spoken to throughout developing this journey, they want that full regime. They want to know they're doing everything they can to get healthy hair and scalp to promote good hair growth. So we've got that journey built out. And then on the back of that, we have our trichologists who reach out to our clients and can sort of help them with any additional questions that they've got once they are a client, and sort of guide them into the right direction. And anyone who comes to clinic, that might look like a blood test, which is often needed for female hair loss. But again, that's something that through our virtual consultations and some smarter partnerships where we can actually help people do that virtually as well. And we go, okay, you can order yourself a blood test from our partner supplier, fill that all out. And then once we get that data back, we can then put them onto the right treatment plan. So it's a lot more in depth and sort of tailored than traditional male journey.
Let's talk about the technology lens then, because it's always a challenge balancing proprietary third-party tech, buy in and use, and you might need to customize and you might face a certain limitation, and therefore you just accept that compromise, versus build your own, which is more challenging, more complex, more costly and time consuming. So the assessments and the subscriptions are 2 areas where lots of retailers do it in different guises, but most use third party, like quizzes in Shopify world, Octane. Subscriptions could be a third party, like a Recharge and Order Groove. How did you go about that? Like, where did you land on it, and what tech approach have you taken?
So we originally built everything from scratch. We built the subscription mechanism from scratch using our payment provider, and then we developed these whole web apps, which we've got one for our clients and then one for our trichologists to sort of manage everything, so that we kept that whole journey contained. I definitely think from the web app perspective, we did that the right way, because everything that we're doing is so customized. We needed something that we could dictate how it needed to work, as opposed to trying to fudge it in something that's like a one size fits all traditional sort of quiz. So that was definitely the right route for us, because it is completely custom built and we have all of these nuanced edge case journeys that we need to account for, which that technology allows us to do. The subscription side of things was not the right decision, and we had built it from the ground up, and we had very bare minimum functionality, which led us to not giving the best experience for the clients originally, because we had to own all of those changes that they would want to make. So if they needed to change a shipping date, change their billing address, update our payment card, that all sat with our internal customer care team, and the clients having to communicate us, which wasn't the best experience. And we were spending probably close to 70% of our development time maintaining that, as opposed to optimizing the journey and improving the functionality. So thank goodness in 2023, we found out that Order Groove were working with Magento clients again. I think that was our biggest pain point, was nobody wanted to work with Magento when we first started developing this program. And so we're like, we'll just do it ourselves. And then managed to get hold of Order Groove. They were working with Magento clients again, and we onboarded them just about 2 years ago now. And it was hands down the best decision we've made. It made everything so much easier. We could give so much more freedom back to the client to control their subscriptions as they would expect from a basic subscription level. But it also gave us access to do so much more with those subscriptions, simplify the tech completely, and also free up a lot of our internal resource as well, who were, managing those customer communications. They were then able to do more added value pieces of work, as opposed to just sort of doing these small nuanced things. So that was a game changer for us. And that's actually led us to using Order Groove as well for our retail subscriptions as well.
Interesting. I think this is the biggest challenge to subscriptions, is if it's just a basic mechanism, a payment mechanism, then building on top of that as a recurring mechanism with the payment provider is fine. But it's when you start to get into the customer portal functionality where you realize, Christ, the complexity to maintain and manage, and things like automatic done-in when cards change, and actually the ability to have that as an automated process so your subscription plans don't fall down. You start to realize how much that adds to maintenance and ongoing development work.
Exactly. It was a huge drain, I think, on our development resource at the time. And since we went live with Order Groove, their support was incredible when we were onboarding and migrating across, and continues to be so. So it was 100% the right decision. And it just gives us access to so much more functionality at literally the click of a button, versus spending, 100 extra hours developing something that in the subscription world is like a basic need. So yeah, if I could redo that, I would, but it taught us some lessons. So live and learn.
Well, but I think this is really important. I mean, every single project I've ever worked on, I come out of it thinking, I did that really well, but God, I could have done that better. And why didn't I see that before? But you don't know what you don't know. And you have to sometimes go through a bit of pain in order to have that moment of, right, okay, so I wouldn't make that decision again.
Yeah, exactly.
I think everyone who's working with technology has scars from decisions that, that digital journey that you've been on in business, you've also, when we're talking about doing this pod, you're saying about the digitization of the clinical business through the marketing as well. So obviously pushing out digital marketing channels. How can you expand this? Like, how have you digitize it? How have you expanded into digital marketing? What role is that playing now in whether that's customer acquisition or keeping active customers?
Yeah, that's been a really interesting one for the clinic as well, because it is the heart of everything that we've done, whether it's the retail side of the business or continuing in the clinic side. Everything stems from the clinic. But as that side of the business, it hasn't had a huge amount of marketing support over the last few years, because the product side is just much bigger. Because we can obviously reach far more people with those products than the clinical side. So we've only really dabbled in that 2.5 month campaign back in 2023. And then as we've been developing and optimizing these journeys, we've gone, let's get this right before we start telling everyone about it. Let's get this right before we start telling everyone about it. And this year we finally got to a place where we're like, okay, we've got everything, all of our ducks in a row, so to speak. And we've got the core propositions right for male and for female. So let's start telling people about it. And so that's been very much a test and learn approach. And we've already actually done some blackout tests with some of our channels. So we've been running on like paid search, paid social, and then we've got our email marketing as well, which supports both lead conversion in terms of anyone who's inquiring with the clinic, but also looking at that sort of post-purchase and optimization lifetime value journeys on the back of a subscription or a virtual consultation. But this year we've sort of been seeing, okay, within the paid media space, which channels are driving an impact? If we have paid social running, where it's such a competitive landscape and, we are a small independent run business, we don't have the same budgets as some of these huge players within the hair loss shedding space. So we've done a blackout test on paid social for the last few months to sort of see what does the impact look like when we have it running versus when we don't. And we're testing turning that back on again this month for a few months to see, does that thing bring everything back up so we can do a true sort of test. But within the paid search space, it's definitely been an interesting one because it's the first time that we've sort of played around with local campaigns as well as a business to sort of drive footfall and leads as opposed to just driving your standard D2C conversion. So it's been really interesting journey to sort of identify what levers work for this side of the business versus a D2C site. Even in the wider scope of the team, which doesn't fall under my team, but that influencer lever as well, and press, how does that impact people inquiring, where we know that we've got a lot of impact that we can have, but it's targeting the right people. And within our clinic database, we've got customers who have been seeing us for, 20 years. And a lot of our marketing actually comes from word of mouth with that client base at the moment. So it's also looking at those channels. How can we boost up that refer a friend sort of program within the clinic side of the business where everything is a bit less digitally focused in terms of that experience for those clients at the moment, because they might not be as digitally savvy. They might like talking to a person. So how do we enable that as opposed to the traditional side on the retail where we know that referral is all purely digital and it's literally just here's a link that you can send to your pals. That doesn't translate as smoothly when we're dealing with clinics face to face. So it's looking at all those sorts of elements as well and just adjusting for the client data that we do have and how we know they like to work.
I'm not surprised you mentioned referral because it was in my mind to talk about it because let's face it, the e-com industry is obsessed with loyalty referrals. But they are often very transactional, rather than, I guess, emotionally based. And you got to tread carefully because just tell everyone about us is you got to be sure that the customer is in a good place, right? First, so I'm intrigued. Yeah. How do you land referrals so that it's positive and it's not just seen as like a I don't know, like a cheap transactional technique?
A lot of what that looks like now for us, and it might not look like this forever, but a lot of it is in the clinic. If somebody is seeing great results, the trichologist and the team in the clinic will just have a chat with those clients to be like, we do have this refer a friend scheme. If you do tell your friends about it, this is what they get on the back of it. And I think it's that human interaction that really works best for clinics who are clients who are visiting us in person, because we get the real sense of how happy they are with the service face to face. And then the trichologists and the team can make those judgments on a case by case basis. Because as you said, with somebody who's coming in for their first consultation and they're not even on a treatment plan yet, there's no point in telling them refer a friend because they don't know how they're going to get on with anything at the moment. But when we've got that longevity relationship with somebody and we've helped them for, years, decades, they're really easy conversations for the team to have to be like, this is what we can offer you if you do refer a friend. Most of the business today is then that sort of word of mouth piece. But also within a wider network as well with people that get recommended by us through their hairdressers or through their dermatologists or through their doctors. So it's that professional referral as well that works really well for us, where we know we've got that expertise, we've got the qualifications, and people trust the brand to do what it needs to do when people are suffering from hair loss or scalp concerns.
Yeah, it's the timing of a referral request is critical, isn't it? Because I was having a conversation with it's a furniture retailer the other day, and it was, they're keen to push referrals, but the mechanism of just when somebody's made a purchase, saying the same refer a friend, for me is the wrong thing to do, because you're not yet sure that they're happy with the service. And if you wait after the delivery, if something goes wrong, then your chances of people referring drop down. So actually knowing when the right time is to push it and when the customer's in a positive mindset and the service you give them is good enough for them to put their reputation on the line by telling their friends and family about it.
Yeah, exactly. And on the retail side of the business, we've actually got some products on that side which take like 3 to 6 months to really work for hair shedding as well. And with that, we had to customize our review platform to enable us to act a delay to those review requests, because typically they would go out, if you're just buying a shampoo or a treatment mask, that would send you a review email like 10, 14 days after your purchase. That does not work for those products because they're like, it's too soon to tell. And we actually saw that really dragging down our average reviews because people couldn't see the results that early. So we customized those processes to be like, send this out, 95 days after they've purchased. So it's sort of taking that approach and going, how do we adjust this for these clients, and how do we know when the right time is? Because we can't even do it based on a pure time frame perspective, because somebody could be coming in after 3 months and saying, actually, this product has, irritated my scalp, or I'm not seeing the results I wanted to see, because there's a lot of perceived value included in these journeys as well, even if the results scientifically are good, but somebody's perceived value of results is a completely different thing.
And I guess what a final question I'd like to ask everybody is strategically, from an ecom point of view, what's the focus going forward? Because you're never going to be doing massive range expansion like some business and chucking loads of different products and collabs with influencers. So where do you focus? Is it about optimizing existing journeys, or is it other areas you're trying to expand into?
I think there's definitely now a piece about optimizing those existing journeys and just making them as smooth, as quick as we possibly can. But I think things like that loyalty element is, how do we bring that into the clinic in the right way, whether it's the refer a friend or if it's actually just rewarding someone for staying with us and for trusting us to keep coming back, whether it's for their consultations or for their subscription element. I think that we could do a lot more with that, but it's just, we don't want to do it in that traditional loyalty points way. That just won't translate to the clinical business. So it's, how do we build that loyalty in a way that is meaningful for the clients and gives them value? So it might be that, we bring Annabelle, our brand owner, into those sort of loyalty reward systems. Is it about giving them an extra hair spa treatment in the clinic, which is more of like a pamper treat? How can we reward people in a way that actually supports the journey that they're going on, as opposed to just being like, you've spent this much with us, here's some points, or here's a free comb. That won't translate to those clinical experiences where it is about the emotional support and about that sort of hair loss and hair growth journeys.
Nice. And look, I could carry on asking questions all day because I'm fascinated. I've got a self-interest in this product area as well, which is quite entertaining. But look, Lauren, thanks very much. I've really enjoyed that. Really, really interesting. It's nice to hear an ecom perspective from a very different product set to a lot of the retailers we speak to. It's been interesting to hear a bit more about the nuances in tailoring user journeys to the male and female audience. If anyone wants to reach out and have a discussion about any of the points you raise, or wants to chew the fat over some of the challenges of creating more bespoke customer journeys online, what's the best way to contact?
Probably just reach out to me on my LinkedIn. Is probably the best way to reach out.
Cool. Well, the LinkedIn link is on the landing page on the InsideCommerce.fm website, so go to it if you want to connect. I highly recommend following Lauren on LinkedIn. So, Lauren, thanks so much. Really enjoyed doing the podcast with you.
Thanks so much, James.
Excellent. And thanks for everyone for listening. As always, any questions related to the episode, do reach out. We always love to chat about ecom. You're listening to the Inside Commerce podcast hosted by experienced consultants James Gerd and Paul Rogers. Inside Commerce is your fast track to digital knowledge, featuring interviews with leading e-commerce retailers, industry thought leaders, and the C-suite of key tech companies to explore the latest in digital strategy, customer experience, and tech. Discover what the latest trends really mean and get practical advice based on experience to help fine-tune your e-com strategy and tech stack. Follow us on LinkedIn and reach out to James or Paul if you'd like to discuss an e-commerce project. We hope you enjoy the latest episode.